The rain had finally softened to a gentle mist, leaving the world smelling of damp earth and clean asphalt. Liam O'Connell held his daughter's small hand, her fingers sticky from the hot chocolate he'd bought her. 7-year-old Lily skipped beside him, her bright yellow raincoat a splash of sunshine against the grey afternoon. Her soccer cleats were caked in mud, a proud trophy from the goal she'd scored that morning. Her laughter was the only music Liam needed. "Daddy, can we go to the park now? The puddles will be huge," she chirped, her face, smudged with chocolate and dirt, tilted up at him. Liam's heart swelled, a familiar ache and warmth mingling within him. She had her mother's eyes, the same shade of deep, thoughtful green. It had been 2 years since Sarah had lost her battle in the sterile quiet of the Willow Creek General Hospital, and in that time Lily had become his entire world, his compass, his reason for breathing. "Not today, sweet pea," he said, his voice gentle. "It's too wet." "But we did get Victory hot chocolate, didn't we?" He squeezed her hand. "Let's just get home, and I'll make us my famous grilled cheese for dinner." Lily considered this with the gravity only a 7-year-old could muster. "With the tomato soup?" "With the tomato soup," he promised, a smile touching his lips. They were walking past the Gilded Spoon, the fanciest cafe in their small, affluent town, a place of delicate pastries and even more delicate egos. Liam, a custom furniture maker who worked with his hands, always felt a little out of place on this particular street, where luxury cars purred at the curb and women in sharp business suits clicked past on impossibly thin heels. As they passed the cafe's wide glass window, a man in a tailored charcoal suit burst through the door, talking loudly into his phone. He was a portrait of wealth and impatience, with a sharp jaw, slicked back hair, and shoes that cost more than Liam's monthly mortgage payment. He wasn't looking where he was going, his attention monopolized by the device pressed to his ear. "No, you tell Peterson that the zoning variance is non-negotiable," he barked. "I don't care what he has to do, just get it done." He took a sharp turn, cutting directly into their path. To avoid a collision, Liam pulled Lily back, but in her soccer cleats, she skidded on the wet pavement. Her small body stumbled, and a spray of muddy water from a puddle arced through the air, speckling the man's polished Italian leather shoes with brown flecks. The man stopped dead. He lowered his phone, his face contorting into a mask of pure disgust. He looked from his shoes to Lily, who had frozen, her eyes wide with fear. "Are you kidding me?" the man snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "Look what you've done. These are $1,000 shoes, you filthy little brat." Liam stepped forward, placing himself between the man and his daughter. "It was an accident," he said, his tone firm but level. "She's just a child." The man's cold eyes, the color of slate, flickered up to meet Liam's. He sized him up in an instant, the worn jeans, the simple flannel shirt, the sawdust under his fingernails. Contempt dripped from his sneer. "An accident? You should teach your offspring to watch where she's going. This is what happens when you let peasants wander around decent neighborhoods." The word peasant hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Liam felt a familiar hot coil of anger tighten in his gut, a temper he'd worked hard to bury with Sarah's passing. He took a deep breath. "There's no need for that. Apologize to my daughter." The man laughed, a short, barking sound devoid of humor. "Apologize? To her?" He gestured dismissively at Lily. "You should be apologizing to me." He took a step closer, invading Liam's space. "You people have no respect for property, for quality, for anything." "Just walk away," Liam said, his voice dropping to a warning growl. He could feel Lily trembling behind his leg. The man seemed to relish the confrontation, his lips curled into a cruel smile. "Or what? You'll make some more sawdust at me?" He gave Liam a hard shove in the chest. It was unexpected and powerful. Liam, off balance on the slick sidewalk, stumbled backward, his arms flailing. He landed hard in the very puddle they had been trying to avoid, the cold, gritty water soaking through his jeans in an instant. A gasp escaped from Lily. "Daddy!" Liam looked up from his undignified position, humiliation and fury warring within him. But the man wasn't finished. His gaze fell upon Lily, who stood paralyzed, tears welling in her green eyes. With a look of utter malice, the man reached out, not with a shove, but with a deliberate firm push against her small shoulder. Lily, all of 50 pounds in her yellow raincoat, had no chance. She cried out as she fell sideways, landing with a soft, sickening splash in the muddy water right beside her father. The bright yellow of her coat was instantly smeared with a foul brown sludge. She didn't get up. She just lay there, her small body shaking with sobs, her face a mess of tears, mud, and crushed innocence. The world seemed to stop. The muted sounds of the town faded into a dull roar in Liam's ears. All he could see was his daughter, his Sarah's daughter, lying in the filth, pushed there by a man whose only injury was a few specks of dirt on his expensive shoes. The man in the suit looked down at them, a triumphant smirk on his face. "There," he said, as if he had just tidied up a mess. "Now you match." He adjusted the knot of his silk tie, a vibrant splash of silver and blue against his charcoal suit. He turned and walked away without a backward glance, resuming his phone call as if nothing had happened. For a moment, Liam couldn't move. He was paralyzed by a rage so pure and so absolute it felt like ice in his veins. But then Lily's sob, a broken, hiccuping sound, shattered the spell. He scrambled to his knees, ignoring the cold mud seeping into his clothes, and crawled to her side. "Lily. Sweetheart, are you okay?" he whispered, his voice thick. He gently rolled her over. She was covered in mud, but physically unharmed. The damage was deeper. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest, her muddy coat staining his shirt. He didn't care. He held her as she cried, her small body racked with tremors, and looked at the spot where the man had stood. He saw the expensive shoes, the tailored suit, the arrogant sneer. And he saw the tie, the silver and blue silk tie. It burned itself into his memory, a symbol of the man's casual cruelty. In that moment, holding his weeping child in a puddle on a public street, Liam O'Connell made a silent, solemn vow. This was not over. The silence in their small truck on the way home was heavier than any words. Lily had cried herself out and now sat huddled in the passenger seat, wrapped in an old blanket from the back, her muddy clothes in a plastic bag on the floor. She stared out the window, her face pale and tracked with clean streaks where her tears had washed away the grime. Liam drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Every time he glanced at her, a fresh wave of rage washed over him. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger he'd felt in his youth. This was different. It was a cold, patient, and methodical fury, the kind a craftsman feels when he sees a beautiful piece of wood carelessly splintered. The man hadn't just pushed his daughter, he had violated something sacred. He had taken Lily's bright, sunny world and smeared it with filth, and for that there had to be a reckoning. Back at their small bungalow, the one Liam had painstakingly renovated himself, he ran a warm bath for Lily. He gently washed the mud from her hair, his large, calloused hands surprisingly tender. She was quiet, her usual post-soccer chatter completely gone. "Does it hurt anywhere, sweet pea?" he asked, his voice soft. She shook her head, not meeting his eyes. "My coat is ruined," she whispered, her lip trembling. "It was my favorite." It was the coat Sarah had bought for her just before she got too sick. The final gift. Liam's chest tightened until it felt hard to breathe. "We'll clean it, Lily, I promise. I can fix anything, remember?" She finally looked at him, her green eyes wide and uncertain. "He was a mean man, Daddy." "Yes, he was," Liam said, his voice a low rumble. "A very mean, very small man." After he had tucked a clean and warm Lily into her bed with a cup of tea and her favorite book, he went into the laundry room. He took out her little yellow raincoat, caked and stained. His first instinct was to scrub it clean, to erase the memory of the humiliation. But he stopped. He looked at the ugly brown smear, a physical record of the day's cruelty. This wasn't just dirt, it was evidence. He carefully laid the coat and his own muddy jeans on a clean tarp in his workshop, letting them air dry exactly as they were. Then he sat down at his sturdy oak workbench, the scent of sawdust and wood varnish a familiar comfort. He booted up his old laptop, the screen flickering to life. He needed a name. He started with what he knew. The Gilded Spoon, around 2:30 p.m. The man was on a business call, talking about a zoning variance and someone named Peterson. It was a long shot, but it was a start. He first called the cafe. A young woman answered, her voice hesitant. "Hi, I was there a little earlier today," Liam began, keeping his voice calm. There was an incident outside, a man in a charcoal suit. "Oh my God, I saw that." The waitress, who introduced herself as Maria, exclaimed, "I was horrified. Is your little girl okay?" I wanted to run out, but my manager, he doesn't like us to get involved. "She's okay," Liam said, the lie tasting like ash. "That man. Do you know who he is? Is he a regular?" "I've seen him a few times," Maria said, "always dressed like that, always yelling into his phone. I think I heard one of the other waitresses say his name once. Croft, Julian Croft. He's some big-shot developer trying to build those hideous luxury condos down by the old mill." Julian Croft. The name felt like a stone in his hand. Heavy, hard. A quick search for Julian Croft Willow Creek developer opened the floodgates. Articles, interviews, glossy photos. There he was, the same arrogant sneer on his face, shaking hands with the mayor, accepting an award, standing in front of architectural renderings of a massive soulless building complex called the Croft Grand. His company's website was a monument to ego, filled with buzzwords like synergy, luxury, and exclusive living. Liam dug deeper, past the polished PR. He read about Croft's aggressive business tactics, the small businesses he'd pushed out, the zoning laws he'd bent to his will. The man didn't just build things, he conquered them. He saw the world and its people as things to be either used or swept aside. Then Liam found it, a local news article announcing the annual Willow Creek Children's Hospital Benefit Gala. It was the biggest charity event of the year, a night where the town's elite gathered to pat themselves on the back for their generosity. And this year's guest of honor and keynote speaker, the man being celebrated for his supposed commitment to the community's children, was Julian Croft. He had apparently made a massive donation to the new pediatric wing, the pediatric wing of the Willow Creek General Hospital, the same wing where Sarah had spent her final weeks, the same wing where the nurses had shown Liam and Lily such kindness, where they had a small playroom that had been Lily's only refuge during that terrible time. The irony was so bitter, so profoundly perverse, it made Liam's head spin. Julian Croft, the man who would push a 7-year-old girl into the mud over a pair of shoes, was going to stand on a stage and be celebrated as a champion for sick children. A plan, cold and sharp as a chisel, began to form in Liam's mind. This wasn't about a street brawl or a shouted confrontation anymore. That was Croft's language, brute force and intimidation. Liam's revenge would be a different kind of craft. It would be quiet, precise, and devastating. Croft had humiliated him and his daughter in public. Liam would return the favor. He would not drag him to a physical execution. He would drag him to a social one in front of the very people whose admiration he so desperately craved. He looked over at the muddy yellow raincoat, drying in the corner of his workshop. That was his raw material. And the gala, in 3 days' time, would be his showroom. He would need a ticket, a suit, and a reservoir of courage he wasn't sure he possessed. But when he pictured Lily's face, crumpled in tears, he knew he would find it. Julian Croft was about to learn that some things, once broken, could not be fixed with money. And some men, when pushed too far, did not just get up. They rebuilt. The next 3 days were a blur of quiet, focused activity. On the surface, Liam maintained their routine. He made Lily pancakes for breakfast, walked her to school, and worked in his shop. The familiar scrape of a hand plane and the whine of the saw filling the air. But beneath the calm facade, a meticulous plan was being assembled, piece by piece, like one of his handcrafted cabinets. His first challenge was the ticket. The gala was an exclusive, high-priced affair. A single seat cost more than he made in a week. He found the event's website and saw the tickets were sold out, but they were still accepting volunteers for setup and breakdown. It was a long shot, but he called the event coordinator, a brisk-sounding woman named Cynthia. He explained he was a local craftsman and would be happy to donate his time to help with the stage setup or any repairs needed. His story was plausible enough. To his surprise, Cynthia, harried and overworked, agreed immediately. "Oh, thank God," she'd said. "Our usual guy came down with the flu. Be at the grand ballroom of the Willow Creek Country Club tomorrow at noon. You'll get a volunteer's pass, which will get you access for the night, but you're expected to work, understand?" "Perfectly," Liam said. The pass was all he needed. Next, the suit. He didn't own one, He had a dusty sports coat he wore to weddings and funerals, but that wouldn't do. He needed to look like he belonged, at least enough to not be thrown out on sight. He drove to a consignment shop in the next town over, a place filled with the ghosts of other people's lives. After an hour of searching, he found it. A simple, dark navy suit, a decade out of style but well made. It was a little tight in the shoulders and short in the arms, a testament to a life of physical labor, but it would have to work. He spent that evening carefully pressing it, trying to smooth out the creases of its former life. The most important preparation, however, was internal. He spent hours online, not just reading about Julian Croft's business dealings, but about the people at the gala. He memorized the names and faces of the town council members, the hospital board, and most importantly, Croft's key investors and business partners. He found an article detailing Croft's ongoing contentious bid for the Riverwalk project, a massive development that required a crucial vote from the City Planning Commission, several of whom would be in attendance. One name stood out, a man named Robert Sterling, a rival developer who had also bid on the project and lost, and was known to be a stickler for public image and ethical conduct. Sterling would be at the main corporate sponsors table right near the stage. Each night after Lily was asleep, Liam would go into his workshop. The muddy raincoat and jeans were now stiff and dry. He folded them carefully, reverently, and placed them in a simple canvas bag. He rehearsed what he would say, not out loud, but in the quiet of his own mind. He didn't want a rambling, angry tirade. He wanted his words to be like his woodworking tools, sharp, precise, and effective. He wanted every person in that room to see Julian Croft not as the titan of industry he pretended to be, but as the petty, cruel bully who had terrorized a child. He also had to prepare Lily. He couldn't and wouldn't force her to do anything, but he knew her presence would be the most powerful statement of all. The evening before the gala, he sat with her on the living room floor, building a castle out of wooden blocks. "Hey, Sweet Pea," he began gently. "Remember the mean man from the other day?" Lily's hands stilled. She nodded, her eyes dropping to the half-finished castle. "Well, tomorrow night he's going to be at a big party. He's going to stand up on a stage and tell everyone what a good person he is." Lily looked up, her brow furrowed in confusion. "But he's not a good person. He's mean." "I know," Liam said, his heart aching at her simple, profound truth. "And I think everyone there should know that too. I have to go there and tell them what he did. And I was wondering if you would be brave enough to come with me. You wouldn't have to say anything. You'd just have to stand with me." He watched her face, ready to drop the subject entirely if he saw even a flicker of fear. But instead, he saw a flicker of something else. Resolve. It was Sarah's resolve, the same quiet strength she'd shown through all her pain. "So they'll know he lied?" she asked. "So they'll know he lied," Liam confirmed. She thought for a long moment, her small finger tracing the grain of a wooden block. "Okay, Daddy," she said finally, her voice small but firm. "I'll be brave with you." On the day of the gala, Liam spent the afternoon at the country club, a volunteer pass clipped to his work shirt. He helped the harried staff assemble the stage, arrange auction items, and run cables, all the while mapping the layout of the room. He noted the exits, the security positions, and the path from the main entrance to the stage. He saw the seating chart and confirmed that Robert Sterling's table was exactly where he expected it to be. He performed his duties quietly and efficiently. Just another anonymous worker in the background, completely invisible to the arriving event planners and florists. That evening, he went home and transformed. He showered, scrubbing the sawdust from his skin, and put on the ill-fitting navy suit. He looked in the mirror and saw a stranger staring back, a man caught between two worlds, the simple carpenter and the avenging father. He dressed Lily in a simple, pretty blue dress that Sarah had loved. He didn't try to make her look like the other children who might be there in their frilly, expensive outfits. He just wanted her to look like herself. Lily O'Connell, 7 years old, brave and true. He knelt before her, holding the canvas bag. "Are you ready, Sweet Pea?" She took a deep breath and nodded, her small hand finding his. "I'm ready, Daddy." As they walked out the door and into the cool night air, Liam felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The anger was still there, a cold, hard stone in his chest, but it was no longer a raging fire. It was fuel. Julian Croft had built an empire of glass and steel on a foundation of intimidation. Tonight, Liam O'Connell, a simple man who built things with wood and his own 2 hands, was going to show him just how fragile that foundation really was. The Willow Creek Country Club was a beacon of light and privilege against the dark, manicured landscape. Valets in crisp red jackets scurried to open the doors of gleaming luxury cars, from which emerged a parade of men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns. The air hummed with polite laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses. Liam parked his dusty pickup truck in the farthest corner of the lot, nestled between a catering van and the employee parking section. He took a deep breath, the scent of pine from the air freshener dangling from his mirror, a stark contrast to the expensive perfumes wafting from the clubhouse. He looked at Lily in the passenger seat. Her eyes were wide as she took in the spectacle. "There are a lot of fancy people, Daddy," she whispered. "They're just people, sweet pea," he said, though his own heart was hammering against his ribs. "Remember what we're here to do. We're just going to tell the truth." He helped her out of the truck, took her hand and grabbed the simple canvas bag from the back seat. They bypassed the grand red-carpeted main entrance and walked around to a side door used by staff, the same one he'd used that afternoon. A bored-looking security guard glanced at the volunteer pass still clipped to Liam's suit jacket. "You're a little overdressed for breakdown crew, pal," the guard grunted, but waved them through. They slipped into the bustling chaos of a service corridor. Waiters rushed past with trays of hors d'oeuvres, and the sounds of the party grew louder, a live jazz band, a swell of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter. Liam guided Lily through the maze of hallways he had memorized earlier, his every sense on high alert. They were ghosts in the machine, invisible to the polished world just a few feet away. He found a small, secluded alcove near the main ballroom doors, shielded by a large potted fern. From here, they could see the crowd without being easily seen. The room was a sea of black ties and shimmering jewels. People mingled, shaking hands, making deals, their faces masks of practiced cordiality. And on a dais at the far end of the room, holding court like a king, was Julian Croft. He was even more imposing in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He laughed, a booming, confident sound, as he clapped a city councilman on the back. He oozed charisma and power, the center of gravity in a room full of influential people. Watching him, Liam felt a flicker of doubt. What was he doing here? He was a carpenter, a nobody. This was Croft's world, and he was an intruder. Then he felt a small tug on his hand. He looked down at Lily. She was watching Croft too, and her expression wasn't one of fear. It was one of quiet, clear-eyed recognition. She knew exactly who and what he was, stripped of all his finery. Her simple certainty steadied him. He was not here for himself. He was here for her. They waited. Liam watched the clock, his plan timed to the event schedule he'd seen pinned up in the kitchen. The mingling and silent auction would last another 20 minutes, followed by dinner service, and then the main event, the keynote address from the guest of honor. As guests began to move towards their tables, Liam spotted Robert Sterling, Croft's business rival. He was a silver-haired man with a stern, watchful face. He sat at his table near the stage, observing the room with the cool appraisal of a shark. He was exactly where Liam needed him to be. The lights dimmed slightly, and the master of ceremonies, a local news anchor, took the stage. He welcomed everyone, made a few tired jokes, and then introduced a video presentation about the new pediatric wing. Photos of smiling children and dedicated nurses flashed across large screens, set to sentimental music. Liam felt a lump form in his throat as he recognized a few of the nurses who had cared for Sarah. He squeezed Lily's hand, grounding himself. After the video, the auctioneer led a spirited live auction, selling off vacation packages and expensive jewelry. Finally, the moment arrived. The news anchor returned to the podium. "And now," he announced, his voice booming with practiced enthusiasm, "it is my distinct honor to introduce a man whose generosity and commitment to the children of our community are truly an inspiration. A titan of industry and a pillar of Willow Creek, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our guest of honor, Mr. Julian Croft." A wave of polite, sustained applause filled the room. Julian Croft walked to the stage, beaming, waving to the crowd as if accepting an Oscar. He shook the anchor's hand and stepped up to the podium, which bore the seal of the Children's Hospital. The spotlight hit him, and he soaked it in, a portrait of civic virtue. Thank you, he began, his voice smooth and resonant. It is truly humbling to be here tonight, surrounded by so many generous hearts. When I look out at this community, I see more than just a town. I see a family. And as a member of this family, I believe it is our sacred duty to protect and nurture our most vulnerable members, our children. Liam's blood ran cold. The hypocrisy was so staggering, it was almost sublime. This was his cue. "Stay right behind me, sweet pea," he whispered to Lily. He took her hand, his other clutching the handle of the canvas bag. They stepped out from behind the fern. A few heads turned as they began to walk towards the stage. A man in a simple, ill-fitting suit and a little girl in a blue dress, moving with quiet purpose through the glittering tables. They were an anomaly, a tear in the perfect fabric of the evening. A waiter tried to intercept them, but Liam sidestepped him without breaking his stride. His eyes were locked on the man on the stage. Croft was in the middle of a self-congratulatory anecdote about his own childhood. And I remember thinking, even then, that if I ever had the chance, I would give back. I would ensure that every child had the same opportunities, the same sense of safety and security that I was blessed with. He trailed off as he saw them approaching. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, then a flash of recognition, quickly replaced by a scowl of annoyance. He clearly remembered the man from the puddle, but couldn't place why he was here. He gave a subtle nod to the security guards near the stage, expecting them to handle the interruption. But Liam was moving faster than they were. He didn't run, but his long, determined strides ate up the distance. The murmuring in the crowd grew louder. People were turning in their seats, sensing a disruption. Robert Sterling leaned forward at his table, his eyes narrowed with intense curiosity. Liam reached the foot of the low stage, just as the two guards began to move in. Croft, irritated, leaned into the microphone. "Excuse me, sir, this is a private event. Security, could you please escort this gentleman out?" He said it with the casual authority of a man used to having problems removed. But Liam was not a problem to be removed. He was a reckoning. In one fluid motion, he swung the canvas bag onto the stage, where it landed with a soft thud. He then placed one hand on the edge of the stage and vaulted up, landing on his feet with a grace that surprised everyone, including himself. He was now standing less than 5 feet from Julian Croft, directly in the spotlight. The two security guards froze, unsure how to proceed without causing a bigger scene. The ballroom fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Croft's face was a mask of fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his voice low but audible in the sudden quiet. Liam didn't answer him. Instead, he turned, reached down, and gently helped Lily up onto the stage beside him. He kept her hand locked firmly in his, a small, warm anchor in a sea of confused and hostile faces. Then he turned back to Croft. He looked past the expensive tuxedo, past the feigned benevolence, and met the cold, slate-grey eyes of the man who had pushed his daughter into the mud. And with his free hand, Liam O'Connell reached out and took hold of Julian Croft's silver and blue silk tie. He didn't yank it. He just closed his fist around it, the fabric a smooth, cool slipknot in his rough, calloused hand. The gasp that rippled through the ballroom was sharp and collective. Julian Croft, the untouchable titan, stood frozen in the spotlight, his expensive silk tie held fast in the fist of a stranger. His face, which moments before had been a picture of philanthropic grace, was now a mottled canvas of shock, rage, and dawning panic. "Let go of me," Croft snarled through clenched teeth, trying to bat Liam's hand away without causing a full-blown scuffle. "Security, get this lunatic off the stage." The two guards started forward again, but Liam's voice, amplified by the podium microphone he now stood beside, stopped them in their tracks. It wasn't a shout. It was calm, measured, and resonated with an authority that silenced the entire room. "My name is Liam O'Connell," he said, his eyes scanning the sea of stunned faces, pausing for a moment on Robert Sterling, who was now leaning forward, his full attention captivated. "And this," he said, his grip tightening on the tie as he pulled a stunned Croft a few inches closer, "is not the man you think he is." He let go of the tie and reached down for the canvas bag. With deliberate, unhurried movements, he pulled out Lily's little yellow raincoat. He held it up for everyone to see. The bright, cheerful yellow was defiled by a huge, ugly smear of dried, caked-on mud. It was a shocking, squalid object in the opulent ballroom. 3 days ago, Liam continued, his voice steady despite the tremor he felt in his soul, this man, Mr. Julian Croft, your guest of honor, was leaving the Gilded Spoon Cafe. My daughter Lily, who had just come from her soccer game, accidentally splashed a few drops of muddy water on his $1,000 shoes. He let the words hang in the air. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, on Lily, on the muddy coat. It was an accident, a child's misstep. I apologized. But for Mr. Croft, that wasn't enough. Liam's gaze found Croft's, and he saw not a flicker of remorse, only pure, cornered fury. He called my 7-year-old daughter a filthy little brat. He called us peasants who shouldn't be allowed in decent neighborhoods. Each word was a hammer blow, dismantling Croft's carefully constructed image. A low murmur spread through the crowd. I asked him to apologize to her. Instead, he shoved me to the ground. Liam gestured to his own ill-fitting suit. And then he looked at my little girl, who was crying and scared, and he deliberately, with his own 2 hands, pushed her face down into a puddle of mud. He held the coat up higher. This is the result. This is the evidence of Mr. Croft's true commitment to the children of our community. This is what he does when he thinks no one of importance is watching. He then turned to his daughter. "Lily," he said softly, his voice for her alone, "can you show them your hands, sweet pea?" Lily, who had been standing silently by his side, her small frame trembling slightly, looked up at her father. She saw the love and strength in his eyes, and her fear subsided, replaced by the simple, powerful courage of a child telling the truth. She held out her small hands. Even from a distance, the guests could see the faint, fading scrapes on her palms from where she had tried to break her fall. The sight of the small, innocent girl and her ruined coat was devastating. The story was no longer just a story. It was real, standing before them on the stage. The silence in the room was no longer just stunned. It was heavy with judgment. Julian Croft finally found his voice, wrenching the microphone from the podium stand. "This is insane. It's a lie. This man is a disgruntled contractor, a lunatic trying to extort money from me. He's trespassing. Security, for God's sake, do your job." But his voice was shrill, laced with a panic that betrayed his guilt. The crowd was no longer looking at him with admiration, but with dawning horror and disgust. Liam saw a woman at a front table slowly shake her head, her hand covering her mouth. He saw the mayor, who had been beaming at Croft minutes earlier, now staring at his shoes, his face pale. Liam ignored Croft's outburst. He had one final, crucial piece to his plan. He stepped forward again, his voice dropping but still carrying in the tense silence. "Mr. Croft is making a very generous donation tonight," Liam said, his eyes sweeping the room. "He's donating to the new pediatric wing at Willow Creek General. It's a place my family knows well." His voice cracked, just for a second. "My wife, Lily's mother, spent her last days in that hospital. The nurses in that wing were angels to us. They created a space of comfort and safety for my daughter during the worst time of her life." He looked directly at Julian Croft. "And you want to put your name on it? The name of a man who would terrorize a child for soiling his shoes. You think your money can wash this clean?" He didn't wait for an answer. He took Croft's tie in his hand again, but this time he didn't just hold it. He started to walk, pulling a sputtering, off-balance Croft with him. He was dragging him. He dragged him away from the podium, away from the spotlight, to the edge of the stage. The security guards, now utterly bewildered, simply stood and watched. Liam pulled him to a halt directly in front of Robert Sterling's table. Croft stumbled, his tuxedo jacket askew, his face purple with rage and humiliation. He was no longer a titan. He was just a bully, exposed and pathetic. Liam looked down at Sterling, whose face was a mask of cold, calculating fury. Liam didn't have to say a word. He had delivered Julian Croft, gift-wrapped in his own disgrace, directly to his greatest rival. He let go of the tie. Croft staggered back, straightening his clothes with hands that shook with adrenaline. He opened his mouth to speak, to salvage some shred of dignity, but no words came out. He looked out at the faces of his peers, his investors, his political allies, and saw only contempt. He saw phones held up, recording his downfall. He saw people getting up from their tables and walking out. His social execution was complete. It was quiet, brutal, and absolute. Liam turned his back on the ruined man. He took Lily's hand, and together they walked to the edge of the stage. He jumped down and then lifted her gently to the floor. Without looking back, they walked through the silent, parting crowd. No one tried to stop them. No one said a word. They just watched as the simple carpenter and his brave little girl walked out of the ballroom, leaving the wreckage of a man's reputation behind them. The walk back through the service corridors and out into the cool night air was surreal. The sounds of the imploding gala, a crescendo of angry, shocked voices, faded behind them. They reached the truck, and the familiar, mundane click of the door unlocking seemed to belong to another world, another life. Liam buckled Lily into her booster seat. She was quiet, her small face illuminated by the faint glow of the dashboard lights. He got in beside her but didn't start the engine. He just sat there, his hands resting on the steering wheel, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving him feeling hollow and shaky. "Are you okay, Daddy?" Lily's small voice cut through the silence. He turned to her, and for the first time that night, he let his own mask of composure fall. He saw the worry in her eyes, and a wave of emotion so powerful it almost buckled him, washed over him. He hadn't just been angry, he had been terrified. Terrified of failing her, of making things worse, of what that world could do to people like them. "I'm okay, sweet pea," he managed to say, his voice thick. "Are you?" She nodded. "I wasn't scared, not with you." She paused, then added, "I don't think that mean man will be mean to anyone else for a while." Out of the mouths of babes. Liam let out a long, shuddering breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "No, I don't think he will be." He started the truck, and they drove away from the country club, leaving the constellation of bright lights and dark deeds behind them. The drive home was quiet, but this time it was a comfortable silence, the kind that follows a storm. The next morning, the story was everywhere. The local news websites led with headlines like "Charity Gala in Chaos," as developer confronted, and Croft's philanthropy questioned after shocking public accusation. Someone had leaked their cell phone footage, and a grainy video of Liam holding up the muddy coat was already going viral in their small community. The narrative was clear and damning. The articles mentioned Julian Croft's stalled Riverwalk project and quoted an anonymous source from the City Planning Commission stating that the project was now under serious ethical review. Liam had no doubt who that source was. Robert Sterling had not wasted a moment. Later that day, a reporter from the local paper showed up at his workshop. Liam politely declined to comment, simply stating that he had said everything he needed to say. He wanted no fame, no notoriety. His goal had been singular: to show a cruel man the consequences of his actions. He'd done that. Now he just wanted to go back to his life, to his wood, and to his daughter. A few days later, a small unmarked envelope appeared in their mailbox. Inside was a cashier's check for $10,000. There was no note, no sender, just the check and a small typed message. For the yellow raincoat, and for her college fund. Liam suspected it was from Sterling, a quiet acknowledgement of the opportunity Liam had handed him, but he could never be sure. He deposited the check into the savings account he'd started for Lily, the one he and Sarah had dreamed of filling together. The biggest change, however, was in Lily. Something had shifted in her that night. She seemed to stand a little taller, her usual childhood shyness replaced by a quiet new confidence. She had faced down the monster and had not flinched. She had seen her father, her quiet, gentle father, transform into a protector who would move mountains, or at least topple giants, for her. Their bond, already strong, had been forged into something unbreakable in that crucible of public humiliation and righteous anger. One sunny Saturday afternoon, a week after the gala, Liam and Lily were in the backyard. He was teaching her how to properly sand a piece of pine, his large hand guiding her small one. She was wearing her yellow raincoat. He had spent hours carefully, painstakingly cleaning it until every last speck of mud was gone, leaving it as bright and sunny as the day her mother had given it to her. She looked up from her work, a smudge of sawdust on her nose. "Daddy?" "Yeah, Sweet Pea?" "I love you," she said, her voice clear and sure. Liam's hands stilled. He knelt down in the grass, his eyes level with hers. He saw his daughter whole and happy. He saw Sarah's eyes, bright with love and life. He saw their future, a path they would walk together, hand in hand. The cold stone of anger in his chest was finally gone, replaced by the familiar welcome warmth of a father's love. "I love you too, Lily," he whispered, pulling her into a hug, the scent of sawdust and sunshine filling his senses. "More than anything in the world."